The horse drank first. Always did. Calder Rains stood beside it, the cracked leather reins hanging loose in his hand, watching the water turn brown with dust. He hadn't spoken to a soul in 3 days, and that was fine by him. Words had a way of turning into promises out here, and he'd already broken enough of those to last a lifetime. He leaned on the trough, squinting at the barn ahead. Boards warped, door half open, wind whining through the gaps. No sound of animals, just the kind of silence that prickled the back of a man's neck. He wasn't looking for trouble. Just water, shade, maybe a dry place to sleep. That's all. But trouble was like his own shadow. Even when he tried to outride it, it followed. When he stepped inside, the smell hit first. Iron, sweat, rot. Then a sound, faint, uneven, not an animal. A breath. He froze. At first he thought maybe it was the wind again or his own guilt playing tricks. He'd been hearing things since the war. Nights when the screams still came, echoing through half-sleep. But then came another breath. Weak. Human. Calder took 2 careful steps, his boots pressing straw flat. Behind a collapsed stall door lay a girl. Barely 20, maybe less. Wrists chained to a post, skin bruised deep. Her dark hair tangled, her eyes half open. Not fear, not even shock. Just empty. He stood there too long. The old soldier in him measured the scene. Who did this? Why? How far gone she was? The man beneath the scars just stared, throat tight. He reached for his canteen, crouched, poured a trickle against her lips. She flinched, then drank. The sound of it, the desperate swallow, hit him harder than any bullet he'd taken. Easy, he muttered, though his own voice sounded foreign. You're safe now. Safe. A lie if there ever was one. Her eyes found him, and for a second something alive flickered there. Fury, maybe, or disbelief. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked to dust. He found a rusted crowbar and broke the chain. The clang echoed through the barn like a confession. He half expected men to rush in, the kind who chained her here. But no one came. Just the wind. She tried to stand and collapsed. Calder caught her without thinking, her body feather-light but burning with fever. He should have left her. That's what the world had taught him. You save someone, you end up paying twice, once in blood, once in regret. But as he carried her outside, something inside him shifted. Maybe it was the way her breath hitched against his shoulder. Or maybe it was the memory of another life. A wife with gentle hands who'd once said, "You can't save everyone, Cal." She was right. He hadn't, not her, not his brother in that canyon, not the men he'd left behind when he walked away from the army. He laid the girl across his horse's saddle, her wrists still bearing the red marks of the chain. The sun beat down, cruel and hot. He didn't even know her name, but he knew the kind of men who'd done this. He used to ride with them. By dusk, the horizon turned red. The girl stirred once, whispering something he couldn't catch. Sounded like Illa, maybe a name, maybe a word from her people. He didn't ask. Some things were better left unsaid until a soul was strong enough to speak them. When he looked back, smoke was rising from the barn, dark, curling, familiar. They were coming back. Whoever they were, he tightened his grip on the reins. "We're not dying here," he muttered, mostly to himself. The horse reared as gunfire cracked in the distance. He turned east, toward the mountains, his jaw set. As they rode through the dark, the girl's fingers clenched weakly around his coat, as if she already knew he'd try to walk away again. And for the first time in years, Calder didn't know if he wanted to. The moon came up pale and quiet, laying silver over the trail, 2 shadows bound by accident, riding away from hell with nothing but dust and ghosts at their backs. The rain started before dawn, the kind that doesn't ask permission, just falls steady, patient like it knows the land's been starving too long. Calder Rains had found the cabin by accident, half hidden behind mesquite trees and rocks. Roof sagged, chimney cracked, but it stood. Out here, that counted as mercy. He'd carried Illa inside before the storm broke, her body limp as wet cloth. Now she lay on an old cot near the stove, eyes closed, breath thin. Calder knelt beside her, wringing out the rag he'd used to clean her wounds. His hands shook more than he liked. Maybe from cold, maybe from the ghosts that had followed him here. "You're safe," he said again, even though he wasn't sure either of them were. Her eyes opened, dark, watchful. There was no thanks in them, no fear either. Just that quiet, unreadable look people get when they've already seen the worst the world can do. "Where am I?" she asked, voice dry as dust. "Shelter," Calder answered. "What's left of it?" She tried to sit up. The chain bruises on her wrists looked worse in the firelight. "You should have left me." "Maybe," he said, tossing another log onto the fire. Sparks jumped, little bursts of gold in the dim. "But I didn't." Silence sat heavy between them, filled only by the rain hammering the roof. Calder glanced at her now and then, the way she stared at the flame, the faint tremor in her fingers. Apache, maybe Navajo. He couldn't tell for sure and didn't dare ask. The frontier didn't forgive curiosity. He remembered his brother saying once, "You'll die out here, Cal, if you keep trying to save ghosts." Maybe he already had. By morning, Illa had found her voice again, softer now, almost steady. She asked for water, then bread, then nothing else. Calder watched her eat in small bites, like someone who'd learned not to expect another meal. "You from around here?" he asked, mostly to break the silence. She shook her head. "My people were." That was all she said. Calder nodded, unsure what to say to that. Everyone out here had lost something. Land, kin, faith. You didn't compare wounds. When he went outside to split kindling, the storm had passed. The air smelled of wet earth, sagebrush, and old sins. He closed his eyes and tried to remember the last time he'd prayed. The war had burned that habit out of him, along with half his faith in men. But watching her fight to sit up, to live, maybe that was prayer enough. Inside, Illa was trying to thread a needle she'd found in a drawer. Her fingers trembled, but she worked slow, patient. The hem of her torn dress lay across her knees. Calder stared for a moment before realizing she was fixing what little dignity she had left. "You don't have to." He started. "I do," she interrupted. "Not for them. For me." That shut him up. He fixed the roof while she worked on her dress. The light from the stove turned the cabin gold and warm, a small island against a world that didn't care if either of them existed. That night, Illa woke screaming. Her voice cracked the dark like a whip. Calder jolted awake, hand on his gun before he realized. She was sitting upright, shaking, eyes wild. "It's gone," he said quickly, crossing the room. "You're safe, hear me?" She didn't answer, just pressed her palms to her ears as if the past still roared there. Calder sat down beside her, unsure what to do. He wasn't good at comfort, never had been. But he stayed. That counted for something. Eventually, her breathing slowed. The fire threw soft light across her face, young, scarred, stubborn. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. Calder looked at the dying flame. "Maybe I do." Rain started again, light this time. The kind that reminds you the world can still start over. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of drops on wood. He'd meant to ride on by sunrise, leave her water and fire, and disappear. That was the plan, but when morning came, he didn't saddle the horse. He brewed coffee instead. For the first time in years, Calder Rains wasn't drifting. He was waiting, and he didn't know why. The mornings had grown quieter. Not silent, just easier. Illa no longer startled when Calder moved near the stove. She even hummed sometimes, low and wordless, as if testing what peace sounded like. The sound startled him at first. It had been years since he'd heard someone hum without fear behind it. Calder stepped outside with his coffee, watching the steam drift into the chill. The canyon was still damp from the last rain. The ground smelled of sage and wet earth. He rubbed his hands, still rough from chopping wood, and tried not to think too hard about what this strange calm meant. He told himself she'd be gone by now, that once her wounds healed, she'd go find her people, and he'd be alone again. That was the deal he'd made in his head, except she hadn't left, and he hadn't asked her to. Inside, Illa was mending a saddle strap. His, not hers. She'd found it cracked and brittle, and without a word decided it needed fixing. Calder watched her from the doorway for a long while before speaking. "You know leather like that don't come back easy," he said. "I know," she replied, threading the needle. "But sometimes things hold longer than they should." He smiled, one of those quiet, involuntary ones that felt strange on his face. "You talk like a preacher." "I listen like one," she said. There was no bite in her tone, no defense, just honesty, and it hit him harder than he liked. Later that afternoon, she joined him outside while he worked the corral fence. The sun burned high and the boards groaned with age. She handed him nails one by one, steady as if they'd been doing this for years. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Every damn day," he said, hammer pausing mid-swing. "And every damn day I don't." "Why?" He shrugged. "Got nowhere left that wants me." She nodded, not out of pity, but recognition. "Same for me." They worked in silence after that. Two broken pieces trying to remember what it felt like to fit somewhere. When evening fell, Ila gathered small stones by the creek, sorting them by color. Calder asked what she was doing. "Marking the quiet," she said. "My mother used to say you keep the world's calm by giving it shape. Stones for the good days, ashes for the bad." He didn't laugh, though he almost did. Instead, he picked up a flat one and set it beside hers. "Then this one's for today." Her eyes met his. Cautious, curious. "Good or bad?" He thought for a moment. Still deciding. They ate supper by the fire that night. Beans, a little dried meat, and silence that didn't ache anymore. Calder found himself talking about the war, about his brother dying in the canyon and how he'd never gone back to the grave. He didn't mean to tell her. "It just came out. I should have stayed," he said softly. "But I didn't. I always walk away before something breaks me." Ila poked the fire with a stick, sparks jumping. "And did it save you?" He looked at her, then at the flames. "Can't say it did." The wind outside sighed through the cracks in the cabin wall. Ila leaned back, the firelight painting her face in golden shadow. "Then maybe staying is the only thing left to learn." Calder didn't answer. He just sat there, feeling the truth of it settle deep. Later, when the night turned cold, he heard her humming again. The same tune as before, soft and steady. This time he didn't move away from the sound. He poured another cup of coffee and stayed awake by the fire, listening. Maybe it wasn't peace. Maybe it was something smaller, trust or the start of it. Whatever it was, it felt rare, real, the kind of thing a man didn't outrun. And as the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, Calder Rains realized he hadn't thought about leaving once that night. The day began like any other. Quiet, ordinary, pretending to be harmless. Calder had gone down to the creek to wash the dust from his hands, the morning sun barely crawling over the canyon rim. Ila was inside, humming again, grinding corn with the flat of a stone. He liked that sound now, that small proof of life. It made the world feel less like punishment. But peace, he'd learned, always comes with an expiration date. When he looked up, the stillness changed. No birds, no wind, just the faint crunch of hooves somewhere up the ridge. His pulse tightened. He knew that rhythm. 3 horses, maybe 4, riding slow, deliberate. Men who didn't need to hurry because they already knew what they'd find. He moved fast, water dripping off his sleeves. "Ila," he called, calm but sharp. "Pack what you can." She froze mid-motion. "Who is it?" Not the kind that knock first. Within minutes, she had her small bundle ready. Shawl, flint, the leather pouch she'd kept under the floorboard. Calder grabbed the rifle, checked the chamber, then cursed under his breath. 2 shells left, he caught her eyes. "If they come close, you run for the canyon. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are," he said, too harsh, too fast. Regret followed immediately, but there wasn't time to fix it. By the time they reached the edge of the clearing, the riders had already appeared. 3 men, rough faces, dusted hats, rifles easy in hand. Calder recognized the one in front. Jed Larkin, a name that tasted like regret and whiskey. "Didn't think you'd crawl this far west, Rains," Jed called out, grinning. "Last I heard, you left your brother in the dirt and rode off with half a payroll that wasn't yours." Calder didn't rise to it. "You came all this way to talk old ghosts?" "Nah," Jed said, dismounting. "I came for the one you stole, the girl. She's worth something to some men I know. Seems you've been holding on to her for all the wrong reasons." Ila's breath hitched beside him. Calder didn't look at her. Couldn't. The world had a way of twisting the truth until it drew blood. Jed's smirk widened. "Funny you rescuing someone like her. Makes a man wonder if you're after forgiveness or just company." Calder's hand tightened around the rifle. "You walk away, Jed, now." But men like Jed didn't walk away. They took. That's all they ever learned. The first shot cracked the air. Calder dove, pulling Ila behind a boulder as splinters flew. He fired back, and once, twice, dropping the second man from his horse. Ila pressed her shawl to her arm where the bullet had grazed her. Go! He barked. She shook her head, eyes wild. Not without you. Damn it, Illa. He turned to fire again, but the hammer clicked empty. Jed was reloading, slow and confident. The rain from the morning before had turned the ground slick, and Calder's boots slid as he tried to move closer to cover. Then Illa did something he didn't expect. She stood, raised her arms, and shouted in her own tongue. A sound that wasn't fear. It was defiance, raw and alive. The echo startled the horses, sent them rearing. Calder lunged forward, tackled Jed as the last rifle fired wild into the sky. When the smoke cleared, Jed lay face down in the mud. Calder's chest heaved, blood streaking down his side. He looked up to see Illa kneeling beside him, trembling but alive. Are they gone? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, for now. She tore a strip from her dress and pressed it to his wound. Her hands were steady, her eyes fierce. You should have left me that day, she whispered. Maybe, he said through clenched teeth. But then I'd still be the man I was. The fire from the gunfight smoldered in the distance, the cabin behind them already burning. Calder looked back once, the place that had almost felt like peace. It's gone, he murmured. Illa tied the cloth tight around his ribs. Then we build somewhere else. He tried to smile but failed. Still, something in her voice, that calm certainty, held him steady. They rode through the smoke and into the pale dawn, the world behind them burning like the past they could no longer hide from. They didn't speak much for the first few days after the fire. Talking felt too heavy, like stirring the ashes might wake the ghosts that hadn't burned away yet. Calder's ribs ached with every breath, and Illa's arm was wrapped in a strip of her torn dress. But they kept moving, always east, always toward the light. The land softened as they rode. Grass began to grow again between the rocks. The creek water ran clear instead of brown. It felt strange, almost wrong, to see color in the world after so much smoke. On the fifth morning, they found a half-collapsed ranch house tucked against a rise of cottonwoods. Calder stopped the horse and stared at it. Ain't much, he said, but it's dry. Illa slid off the saddle carefully. It's enough, she said. They spent the day clearing the place, lifting fallen beams, sweeping out dust thick as history. Calder's side hurt, but he didn't complain. Illa worked beside him, quiet but sure, her movements steady like someone who'd rebuilt her life before. By nightfall they had a roof that didn't leak, a stove that breathed again, and two hearts that hadn't given up trying. When he sat by the fire that night, Calder realized the silence wasn't empty anymore. It had weight, shape. It was something you could rest inside. You ever think about going back? Illa asked softly, eyes on the flame. He shook his head. Ain't nothing left there to go back to. Just gravestones and guilt. She nodded, turning a small stone in her palm. Then you start here. With what's alive? He watched her hand, the same one that had once trembled from fear, now steady, tracing the stone like a prayer. He wondered how something broken could learn to hold peace so carefully. The days grew into weeks. Calder built a fence. Illa planted seeds near the creek. It wasn't much. Beans, corn, a patch of wildflowers, she said, would keep the spirits busy. Sometimes, when the wind was right, he'd hear her humming again. This time, the tune sounded like a story with an ending. One afternoon, a wagon rolled up the trail. A rancher, older, hat low, reins in one hand. Calder tensed by habit, hand near his belt, but the man only tipped his hat. Didn't know anyone settled this far out, the stranger said. You buying or squatting? Neither, Calder said. Just fixing what's left. The man's eyes wandered to Illa, who stood near the garden, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back with a strip of linen. There was respect in his nod. World needs more fixing than claiming these days, he said, then turned his horse and rode on. After he left, Illa looked at Calder and smiled faintly. You didn't tell him your name? Didn't seem important, he said. It will be. Someday. He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. That night, he carved something small into the cabin's doorframe. Rains Creek. Not to mark ownership, just memory. A way of saying we were here. The next morning, Illa lit the kerosene lamp and set it in the window, even though the sun was already up. The flame flickered against the glass, reaching into the daylight like a quiet signal. For wanderers, for the lost, for the man she'd saved without meaning to. Calder stood behind her, hand resting on the doorframe. "You think anyone'll see it?" "Doesn't matter," she said. "It's there." They stood together for a long moment, the smell of coffee and dust in the air, the sound of the wind running gentle through the grass. The world hadn't forgiven them. Maybe it never would. But it had given them a corner of peace to build from. And as the light poured through the cabin door, Calder Rains finally understood what home felt like. Not a place, not a promise, but a person who stayed when everything else burned away. He smiled, quiet and sure. "We made it, didn't we?" Illa turned, that small, knowing smile on her face. "Not yet," she said, "but we're close." The lamp flickered, the wind breathed, and somewhere beyond the hills, the world began again.